Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jim Nowakowski with Interline Creative Group. Using research to stay in front of your customers is the topic. I'm so glad you're here. I know this is going to be an hour of your time you'll never get back, so I'm going to try to make it worth your while. This is an approved course by the AIA. So architects who we have in the audience, designers we have in the audience, anybody that's seeking AIA approval will get it. We'll be able to help you when the webinar is over if you can't self-report. It's also approved by the IDCEC. So this is good for interior designers who are out in the audience. And again, we have many people in the audience today. We have almost 50 people. And so I'm so glad you gave us your time today to go over this very important topic on research. And finally, it's approved by the NKBA. The NKBA, of course, is the National Kitchen and Bath Association. So all three of these organizations have looked this content over and approved it. And it's also copyrighted by the United States copyright laws. However, when we're done, if you'd like, I'd be happy to send you a PDF file of the slides in this course. We've got a lot to cover. I've done this course in the past, and people say, there's a lot of content, Jim. Why don't you split it into two? But then that would require 2 hours of your time. I'm kidding. The course description that you signed up for remains the same. It's to help professionals, designers, and architects understand the market today by conducting research. And boy, do we need understanding of the market today. So attendees will discover how research in any business landscape can provide customer insights and help formulate marketing strategies to create, protect, and renew their brands. You know, brand is very important, isn't it? You have a brand, you specify brands, everybody's brand. But what is a brand? That's not the topic. Well, we could do research on that. What we're going to do is we're going to review business basics and research, which never change. Business basics, we want to sell more stuff, right? Don't we want to sell more services? And we want to learn how research can give us insights on how to do just that, how to sell more stuff. We're going to take a close look at what we call RFM, recency, frequency, monetary principles. Those are principles of looking at your data, your customer file. I think you'll find that very interesting. And we'll also do evaluation of research findings and show you how to do that with the market. But first, I always like to begin with a couple of stories. Actually, one story, but in this case, two. So I'm in Las Vegas 1 year recently, and this is the Aria restaurant, and I'm coming at 3 o'clock because you can't sleep if you're from Chicago and you're in Las Vegas. And I see this beautiful panorama at the restaurant. You can see these rocks. They're rocks. This is a high design, right? And there's two guys back there as I'm nearing it. You can see them just barely behind the staircase. And as I look around on what these things are behind these glass plates, I see that they're rocks. These are just rocks, big rocks, small rocks, rocks. And then I come closer and I realize that these guys are repairing one of the plates, or I assume, which you shouldn't do, that maybe, and it's Las Vegas and people stay up late at night, maybe one of the people kicked one of those glasses on the bottom and these guys are repairing it. So as the maitre d' gets my coffee, because it was too early to sit down, but they would bring me coffee, I said, "You're too kind." I engaged in conversation. And one of the principles I want to teach you about is to really engage in conversation all the time. Really what you want to do is do research all the time, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. So I talked to these guys and I said, well, you know, something happened, you're replacing the glass. And they said, one of them says, "Oh no, we're not replacing, nothing broke. We're just, we're dusting the rocks." I said, "Pardon me?" He said, "We're cleaning the rocks." I said, "Oh, dude, is this?" "Oh yeah, we have to clean the rocks and we do it at night when no one's around and we have to do all the rocks." Now you saw what that display looked like. There's a lot of rocks, a lot of glass. And I said, "How long does it take you to clean these rocks?" He goes, "It's about a 3 or 4 month cycle from one end to the other, and then we got to go back and do it again." Oh, I said, so you have a perpetual job. He smiled and went back to cleaning his rocks. I wrote a blog about this, about Sisyphus, who was the Greek god that was told that he has to roll a rock uphill and never make it to the top. I think you'd find it of interest. So if I would have just concluded that somebody kicked the glass, took my coffee, and went away, I would have drawn the wrong conclusion. And one of the things you want to be careful about in research is drawing the wrong conclusion. But because we're doing research and because the world is changing so fast, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to stop the meter sometime and draw a conclusion. You just got to be careful. You don't want to shoot too fast. Story number 2, I'm picking up fruit for the office. I like to keep fruit in the office. We like to eat fresh fruit. And so I'm picking up my weekly batches of bananas. I picked 3 batches. And there's a guy next to me at the local fruit market. It's a great fruit market, Eurofresh it's called, in Palatine, Illinois. And you can see there's 2 signs here. One says 59 cents. The other one is blank. And this guy next to me is picking up a bunch, looking at them intently. He's doing research on the bunches of bananas. He's looking at them intently, and I'm looking at him. And then he picks up another bunch, and then another bunch. He looks at me, picks up another bunch. He's very intent on his banana picking. I see my 3rd bunch in front of him, and I say, "Pardon me." And he looks as I pick up the bunch that was in front of him. He looks at it very carefully as I bring it back to myself and begin putting it in my plastic bag. And he engages me. And he said, Are those 59-cent bananas? I said, "Yes, they are." He says, "But the sign there's no sign, there's no price on that over here." I said, "That's a good observation." I said, "But they're all 59 cents on this sign." He says, "Are they organic?" I said, "No, organic is on the other side. And organic is on the other side of these other bananas." And I said, "But if you ask me, they're coming from the ground. Organic is organic. But anyway, on the other side, you'll see them, and they're in plastic bands, because they don't want to mix the organic bananas with these bananas, which are regular bananas. Don't ask me the difference." And I said, "Besides, those are more expensive." Now, this is before inflation, ladies and gentlemen, so don't expect to buy regular bananas at 59 a pound or whatever. So he said, he comes back and he says, "But why do these regular bananas have different labels on them if they're the same price?" And I look closer, and sure enough, some are Chiquita, another has a different brand on them, Del Monte, I think. And I said, "That's a good point again. This guy's a very good observer." And I said, "But they're all 59 cents. He said, "How do you know that?" I said, "Because they're all on this side of the table." And he looked at me and he said, "You seem to know your banana." And I said, I guess I do. It's nature's perfect product. I happen to have read a book about the banana king. It's a long story, but anyway, it's nature's perfect fruit. And then there's a guy on the other side where the organic bananas are, and he goes, "What about an egg?" And I said, "Well, every vitamin known to man is in the yolk of an egg." And the guy says, "Including the cholesterol." And we all laughed. I left home. The point of the story is that that's a moment in time. I wrote a blog about that too. You can read it. If you Google, "Do you know your bananas?" I'm number 1 on Google. So if you do research and you engage people, you will always learn something. You'll always learn something. I may never use, but I use this story in this presentation. Who is this man? Well, I put his name on the bottom in case you don't know him. His name is David Ogilvy. He was a great advertising genius. And he's the guy who I read all of his books and studied under when I entered advertising. But he was essentially a research guy. He came into advertising to do research. He said a lot of profound things. One of them is that if you're trying to persuade people to do something, and ladies and gentlemen, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to persuade people to buy your services. If you're an architect, designer, showroom, you're trying to sell stuff. You're trying to, and you should use the language, their language, the language that they use every day, rather than something, that doesn't really match how people talk. You want to write in their vernacular. And nowhere is that more true than in the world we occupy now. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of disinformation out there. And if you're trying to sell stuff, you just want to talk in regular terms, don't you? One of his most famous ads was at 60 miles an hour. The loudest noise in this new Rolls Royce comes from the electric clock. Now, I don't own a Rolls. You don't own a Rolls, hopefully. Maybe some of you do. I don't know. But if you look at the price tag of this puppy, it's $11,995. That's an old ad, ladies and gentlemen. You can't touch a Rolls for that amount of money. But you can see what Ogilvy is doing. He's using your senses. He's using your senses of sound to talk about a quality of that product. And therein lies what you want to do with your research, to find out how you are different from other designers and architects and people in the audience. And you're all competitors. If I were to ask you are you really, really good at what you do? I would imagine all 50 people of you would say, absolutely. And of course, well, how would I, the dumb consumer, know which one of you to hire with my dollar? Who should I give my dollar to? The only way you do that is through differentiation. The only way you uncover your differentiation is through research. Look at the first quote from David Ogilvy. People who ignore research are as dangerous as generals who ignore codes from the enemy. Now, research is great. It's not the end all. There's plenty of examples I will give you throughout this presentation of how research did not work, despite what the research says. The first example that comes to mind is the Coca-Cola formula when they tried to change it many years ago. Some of you remember it. Many of you don't. Many of you listen to The Economist. Who could have predicted the banking failures today that are going on right now? Who could have done that? Well, I would imagine research could have done that. Research could have done a lot of things, right? But who do you believe? And what do you believe? And that's why one of the things I'm going to tell you today is you have to believe your own research, what your gut tells you. And then what your gut tells you, you should go out and research it and prove it true or false. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing wrong with a yes or a no. We like the yes better, but a no is just as good. I love no's because that's closer to get me to the yes. You understand that? So research is like that. Never stop testing is his second quote. Your messages will never stop improving. Test, test, test. I come from the world of direct marketing where we're testing all the time, different offers, different colors. I can't tell you how much we tested in those days. We still do. Test the subject lines of your emails. Find out which ones work. Test, test, test. So look at the fourth bullet, second from the bottom. On the average, 5 times as many people read the headline as in the body copy. 5 times as many read your subject line in your emails. If your subject line doesn't have something compelling, guess what? Trash. And you do get a lot of emails. Anyway, I told you we're going to cover business basics. Well, how many customers did you have before COVID and how many do you have now? If I give this as a live presentation, there's always a smarty pants in the audience that says, how many customers do you have now? Not enough. Of course, that's true, but it isn't true. If you doubled the amount of customers you have now, you would go out of business. Why? Well, because you couldn't handle them unless you staffed up. You know how long it takes to find quality staff these days? So you have to be careful how you answer these questions. And not only that, research can help you answer these questions. How many customers do you want? How many can you handle? What are your short-term goals, long-term goals? What's a short-term goal? Well, the short-term goal means what do you want to do next month, this quarter? A long-term goal can be what do you want to do this month, this quarter? Short-term and long-term are meaningless unless you define them. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things you have to learn is that you are in charge of the definitions of what you're talking about, including research. Now, if you have questions, put them in the question box. If you have questions, you can do them in the chat box or question box or send me an email afterwards. I'll give you my email address. But this is more of a dialogue as well. So do you have any questions? I don't see any questions coming in. So if you do have a question, just put something in there. I would appreciate it. Ask yourself at every moment, is what I'm doing necessary? For example, I'm going to put myself on the spot here. Is listening to Jim Nowakowski in this webinar necessary? Well, that's your decision. I think it's necessary, which is why I offered this course. The AIA, NKBA, and IDCEC think it's necessary. That's why I approved the course. It's a good course. I've given it before. But is it necessary? Well, what is necessary? Breathing is necessary. If you don't live in Palatine, Ohio, wherever that trade spill was, Palestine. So, is it necessary? Eliminate the unnecessary to eliminate unnecessary actions. Time is limited. I'm going to give you everything I know about research if I can in an hour. And I'm going to try to make this a very valuable hour for you. And I see many of you are paying attention. And you can tell with these GoToWebinar meetings if you're not. So what the heck is research? Research is about finding out in advance if a method, product, service, whatever the heck you're thinking about, life, if whatever you're thinking about, specifying if your market would be open to doing it. It's finding out the truth. It's finding out whether or not you should go or not go. It's very important. It's testing. It's asking. It's engaging. And you should be doing it from the time you get up to the time you go to sleep. I'm serious. You should be thinking about these things all the time if you're in business. It's a way to challenge yourself. For example, if everybody was talking about the virus when COVID was going on, and if everyone was thinking, and by the way, they're still doing that to a degree now, right? You'd have to admit that. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to change the conversation. You have to do that. You cannot go with what people are talking about if you expect to sell your product. So what should you change the conversation to? Well, research can help you figure that out. Besides, look at what happened with the research around COVID. When it first came out, it was like the sky is falling. We're all going to die. That's not true. That never was true. And it never was true if you started listening to the research going on, if you could get the correct information. So above all, research is about information, the right information. Now, what's right and what's wrong, again, as I said before, you are the determining factor of the definitions of those words. Because in fact, right and wrong are really relative things theoretically, right? So you have to really think about the definitions of what you're talking about, because the way you find out the truth, there's only one way, ladies and gentlemen. You compare. Knowledge is comparison. To find out if this is a fork in front of me, you need a spoon next to it. Oh, then you can tell that's a fork. You wouldn't know it's a fork unless you had something next to it to tell it's a fork. A yes is a yes, but you wouldn't know what a yes is unless you had a no next to it. We were brought up this way. And that's why one of the first things I'm going to tell you when you start doing research, I'm going to whisper this because it may frighten some people and I may lose some people from the audience. Erase your blackboard. What does that mean? Erase your blackboard. When we're born, we have a blank blackboard. Blackboard dates me, right? That's what they used to write on in schools, and now they write on tablets. So you write on your blackboard, people write on your blackboard. They start writing things on your blackboard, and you think they're yours, but they have been written by someone else. So the first thing you have to do about research, the first thing you have to do with research is erase your blackboard and forget any preconceived notions you have about a service, about a thing, about anything, and just go in with an open mind, a free mind, an open mind to suggestion and say, well, that could be. That could be. Don't go in, well, it's impossible. Really. Going to the moon was impossible when I was a young man, and yet I remember them landing on the moon until today. Some people will still say, that never happened. It was staged. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying about writing on your blackboard? Everyone in the audience, most people in the audience know who Houzz is. Houzz is a great source of information. It has the largest pictures in the world about kitchens and baths and things like that. So basically, Houzz is a go-to place for designers, for consumers, for contractors, and they produce research. Now, here's a piece of research that basically says only 1 in 4 people hire general contractors. And if you look at this, and you're a general contractor, that's a pretty scary statistic. And yet the contractors I talk to are all very busy. They have no time. So someone's hiring them. And yet this was done who renovated in 2020 when the virus hit. Houzz, many designers in the audience, and when I present to designers, they have a love-hate relationship with Houzz. You put your material on Houzz, and then they want to charge you to be upper in the rankings, which is how they make money. And that's okay too. Consumers go to Houzz to get ideas, your ideas. And then they take those ideas, some of them your ideas, and then they actually use them without you knowing it. That's the danger of Houzz. It's also the danger of your website. Your website is the most important marketing tactic you have. Should I repeat that? Your website is the most important marketing tactic you have. You know why? Because that's where you want people to live. That's where you want people to generate activity for you. Not on Houzz. I'm not saying don't use Houzz. You can use Houzz, but put it on your website. Here's another Houzz statistics. Look at the difference in age groups of who demand professional help. Oh, Jim, I'm going to aim at Gen Z people. They obviously need me. They know nothing. Well, good luck with that, because they are not hiring professional help. You can see here, right, the differences in the overall, the specialty, the different color lines, and the different generations: baby boomers, seniors, Gen X, millennials, etc. Right? Only overall 83%, but only design related, only 14. People are not using design related, according to Houzz. And why? Because Houzz probably puts designers there. Here's some inspiration. Jim Lovell was the guy who brought back Apollo 13 after that almost failed mission. And he wrote, there's 3 kinds of people: people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who wonder what happened. Which one are you? Which one are you? Are you the kind of person that makes things happen? Are you the kind of person that watch things happen? Or are you the person that you wonder what happened, right? One of the things about research is that if you heard that for the first time, or if you may have heard Lovell in his book say that, that's great, right? Gene Kranz, the guy who was he was the flight commander who actually brought back Apollo 13, Gene Kranz. Niccolo Machiavelli, let me say that 5 times, said it in 1513. There are 3 kinds of brains. One understands unassisted, another understands when shown by others, and the third understands neither alone nor with others. One is excellent, the second is excellent, but the third is useless. Which one are we? I want to be the person that makes things happen, which is why I started my business 30 years ago. I tried to make things happen. I was fired 3 times. It's good to try to make things happen. You learn from a mistake. Let me put it another way. Michael Crichton. If someone tries to kill you, if someone tries to lock you down, someone tries to stop your livelihood, you do not have the option of averting your eyes. You have to deal with that behavior. You lose illusion. That's what happened in COVID, ladies and gentlemen. The world is not how you want it to be. It's how it is. You are in a business. Your business is survival. You have to survive. Look at the banking. How do you collapse a bank? How do you do that? How do you kill a bank? I don't know. They didn't have enough money. How did that happen? Ladies and gentlemen, it's incompetence. That's the answer. Oh, Jim, what do you mean? There's variables like COVID. COVID can kill a business. In fact, look at all COVID did. But did COVID kill the business? Or did the regulations that the government put in kill the businesses? That's your question. That's what research does. Listen, engage, think. Listen, engage, think. Research is everybody's secret weapon. In fact, it's what will kill certain businesses. I mentioned Coca-Cola's new formula, which they researched the heck out of, and when they launched it, it collapsed. They had to go back to the old formula and say, oh, I goofed up. Kodak, when I was a young man, owned the film business. They owned the camera business. And along came digital. And Kodak knew this. They did research. They saw digital coming. And you know what Kodak said? Well, it's a fad. It's not gonna take off. Boy, were they wrong. They are a semblance of what they were. You have to watch people. You have to listen to people. Because, ladies and gentlemen, they are listening to you. How do you react to what's going on around you? That's what you want to do. Research is about observation, not only of what's going on around you, but about you. What are you doing to the same stimulus that other people are reacting to? What are you doing when you see a story about one of the major banks in the world collapsing? What do you do? Do you take your money out and put it in the mattress? Are other people doing that? Or do you stay the steady course? What information is being fed to you about banking? One guy said the other day that he should allow regional banks to fail. He was the guy from the Shark, right? If you watch Shark Tank, smart guy, made a lot of money. He's making lots of money. He's got a good advice, but is that the advice? Only you can tell. More examples. You remember Uber when Uber was launched? It was the devil. Oh my God, it's going to kill the cab drivers. Ladies and gentlemen, they're still cab drivers. In fact, some cab drivers are Uber drivers in their spare time. I talk to cab drivers. What trends are emerging now in your business that are happening now? Look what COVID did to the hotel business. Look what COVID's doing to the hotel business. Look what COVID's doing to hotels who renovate and become apartments. Watch around you, and how do you fit? How do your services fit? What the heck is going on around you? Now, if you don't know what's going on around you, you're like Machiavelli's brains, right? You're kind of useless, right? If you just don't understand anything. But you wouldn't be in the audience if that were true. You want to make things happen. You want to have information to help you make things happen. And that's what I'm trying to give you. One of the best techniques is to go undercover. The Undercover Boss, which I never watched. Be an invisible shopper. The president of the bank, one of the banks we bank at, once asked me, why don't you want anybody to know you're a business owner? I said, because, Tom, they will not treat me the same way. What do you mean? I want everybody to know I'm the president of the bank. And I said, of course you do, because you're the president of the bank. You want people to know that. You have a position. Well, why don't you want people to know you own a business, a very successful business? I said, because then they wouldn't talk to me the same way. What do you mean? They wouldn't talk to me like a regular consumer. They think I own a business. Remember about the blackboard. Erase the blackboard. That means erase your own blackboard. Forget who you are and go undercover and be treated like a regular person. I know that's hard for us to do because we're very good at what we do and all that stuff, but lose it. Lose that hubris a little bit and go out there and get kicked in a little bit. Start listening to people. It's amazing what you'll hear. Amazing. And get over that creep factor. You know, before COVID, privacy was very important. Nowadays, people, do they really care? I mean, there's Alexa. Alexa's listening to you now. We used to do focus groups at High Point. High Point is a great, big furniture, the biggest in the country, right? We'd go down there and we'd have focus groups and we'd listen to designers. We knew about some of these applications, like Pinterest was just being born. I remember distinctly at High Point, I was talking to a designer coming down there and they were talking you got to see Pinterest. You got to see Pinterest. I said, Pinterest, what's that? Well, Pinterest, it's the latest hot thing. In my latest social media webinar, when it was advanced and I was talking about Pinterest, and I said, and now there's TikTok. And that was only 3 or 4 years ago. I remember when Twitter was invented. That's how fast the world's moving. Every time something like that happens, it changes the complexion of what you're doing. It affects you. Well, Jim, it can't affect me. How does social media affect me? Ladies and gentlemen, if you know anything about physics, for every action, there's a reaction. And you may not know it, but it's going to affect you in one way or the other. And research is the only way I know of to try to figure out how it's going to impact you. Take AI. Everyone's talking about AI, artificial intelligence. You know why that's a scary proposition? Not because it's good and it's good technology, because it's artificial. It's fake. It's artificial intelligence. It's the accumulation and aggregation of everything you know and I know. There are people going online today trying to design a structural thing, a room, and once they design it, it's going to fall apart because they don't know what the architect and structural engineer knows. But yet some program tells them that they can do this, and therefore they think they can do it. And it falls apart. Research tells us this. So you got to hang around. I'm always in a suit when I travel. Suit and tie, buttoned up. Lady comes up to me in Vegas. Are you asking me directions? I said, I don't know. I'm waiting for my client, which I was doing for breakfast. She started laughing. She said, I thought you were a security guard because I wore a little American flag on my lapel, right? So research everything from the moment you get up to the time you go to sleep. Adapt, change, or disappear. I didn't say that. Anticipate, react, adapt. Alexander the Great said that. That's the only strategy you need. You have to do that. And how do corporations do it? They pay gobs of money for research. Siemens is a huge German company. They spend, I don't even want to tell you what they spend, a day on research, a day, millions of dollars a day. There's an AI company that actually, I'll show you in a minute, he aggregated 22 billion images, categorized them, and has a way of showing if the brand's message is being accepted by the people on social media. There are businesses and springing up and dying all over the place. In fact, a lot of businesses for the first time fail. But if you read this quote from Johnson & Johnson Pearl Park, you need good enough to move on. You'll never get 100%. You need good enough. So bad data is actually worse than no data at all. So if you're at 80%, take the shot. Take the shot. If you're a distributor or a showroom, hang around Home Depot. Here's some ideas. Visit a showroom. Visit another showroom. Go undercover. See what people are doing in that other showroom, your competitor. What are people buying? Talk to people. Visit the association websites, join the association, and dig into the research that they have. Because every association worth their salt has research. Engage people. If you're an architect, go to meetings with other architects. Go to meetings at facilities. Go to facility meetings to find out what facilities want. Look at what Gensler's doing. When COVID actually happened, Gensler started producing Dialogue newsletter. You see it on the bottom right. Dialogue was a newsletter that they continue to put out that I continue to get, and it's full of useful information. Gensler, of course, is the largest architect in the country, right? One of them. Jim, I'm a small architectural firm. I only have 10 people. I don't compete with Gensler. I'm a designer. I don't compete with Gensler. I'm a manufacturer. I don't have anything to do with Gensler. Wrong. You're all wrong. Gensler's ideas give you ideas. They tell you how the leading architect in the country, one of them, is thinking about what's going on around them. They cannot help but stimulate you. So grab onto these things. Visit other websites. Go international. If you're a manufacturer, for heaven's sakes, join associations like NAM or the KCMA. These are associations that do wonderful things in the business and help you understand and produce research to help you better understand your position in the universe. Don't just consider your associations, think outside the box. Like one of my favorite associations is Business of Fashion. Why? What does fashion got to do with what you do, Jim? Well, everything, because fashion is a business. If it's about business, Jim Nowakowski is interested in. And there's plenty about fashion besides taste, right? About how you become successful in fashion. If you do any type of business and you're dealing with the government, legislation is important, especially after COVID. Build Track 50 is one of our clients. We represent them. They're very good at tracking legislation, very affordable. Well, it has nothing to do with me, Jim. Really, water conservation doesn't have anything to do with you? Really? Climate change doesn't have anything to do with you? Really? Plastic doesn't have anything to do? This legislation is important to positioning your product. And guess what? You don't even have to buy it all. The IRS has a website where you can go and look at zip code analysis that tells you about the tax returns of that zip codes. They don't tell you which tax returns. They don't identify the person, but they have aggregated all the tax return, which leads me to the next topic, which is zip code analysis. If you're doing business in a certain zip code, it's because you're not selling $10,000 or $100,000 kitchens or designing, whatever you're designing, you're in a demographic. There goes Jim again, profiling. There's nothing wrong with that world. You're in a demographic. So this type of website that the IRS has is open to the public. Come on in. And they give you this information. You just got to be smart enough to use it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about insight. Sometimes, right, you tell people you can't know everything. So use research to help you know as much as you can before you pull the trigger on your own business. As I said before, your website is very important. Jim, should I start a blog on my website? Do some research about it. The answer is yes. Why? Because you're in a content war. What does that mean? Well, it's about content. And the more content you have, the more chances you are of being on page one, which is how people find you these days. They don't just call up their neighbor and say, who did you use for this or that? They actually go to Google, like you do, like I do. We have a love-hate relationships with Google. So you want to be on page one. Well, what does that mean? You're in a content war. The more content you have, the better off. What can research tell you? They can give you a good jump start on what you need to do to start thinking your way through the difficult times that we live in. Research is everything. Recency, frequency, monetary value. If you take your customer file and you sort it, you're going to sort it for the most recent person you did business with, which means the bottom of the file. Let's say you have 100 customers. The top of it, if you sort it by most recent customer, will be on top, but the bottom ones will be your least recent customers. We used to have a saying, when I was in the agency business, I have my own agency now. We would go in, I remember going distinctly to the director of marketing at a very big brand, commercial climate brand, unnamed. And I said, give me your dead file. And she said, what are you going to do with what do you mean my dead file? What's a dead file? What's that? I said, that's the people who you haven't talked to in a while, your least recent customers. Do I have one of those? She said. I said, of course you do. It's in your accounting system, probably residing in there. And it's the person, if you look at the date, the last time you did business with them. They're the old customers, or the dead file, as we call them. Well, that's great. What are you going to do with them, Jim? Well, I'm going to bring them back to life. What are you talking about? Like Lazarus? I said, well, not like Lazarus. I'm not Jesus, but I'm going to bring him back to life. How are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to mail him a letter. What are you going to say in your letter? Well, that's another story. But you haven't talked to them, obviously, in a long time, which is why they're at the bottom of that recency pile. Every time it worked. Every time that worked every time. All you have to do is start talking to your least recent customers. Guaranteed you'll get business. Frequency is taking the same 100 people and sorting them by the most people who buy more often from you. Well, Jim, people only buy one and dones for me. That's not true. If it is true, then you need a recommendation program to go to find their friends who will buy from you. But I've never met a one and done. Never. Even on commodity products, never one and done. Houses, never one and done. People will own 2 to 3 houses in their lifetime. Maybe not young people who don't want houses. But frequency is your most often used person, right? So look at those people. And what does that tell you? Well, the least frequent people, those will again be on the bottom of the pile, right? The top of the pile is the most frequent. The bottom of the pile is the least frequent. Find out about them. Do research on them. Why are they only coming back? What did you do to tick them off? You may have done something. I know it's hard to believe. And then take the 700 people and sort them by monetary value. The people who generated the most income for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the most income. And then again, you're going to have the most income, and on the bottom will be the least income. Is there a way to take the least income people and move them to the most income people? What makes the most income people the most income people? These are the questions you have to ask. These are the fields you need at a minimum to do this type of analysis, which you already have. As I said earlier, they probably don't reside in your customer file. They're in your accounting system. And unfortunately, they're diverse and they don't talk to each other. You have to get them to talk to each other. And the way to do that is to bring them into Excel. Excel is God's gift to all of us. If you don't know how to use Excel, you better learn. If you don't know how to use Excel, get someone who does. There's nothing like Excel. Excel, you'll be able to manipulate data. Start looking at data in ways you've never done before, and the data will reveal things to you. We just looked at some data for a client. I'm not going to mention who just today. We have a reverse IP lookup code that tracks companies, not people, but companies who come to websites, and we can look at their journey. If you Google B2B never sleeps, B2B, number 2, never sleeps, you'll see my blog on this. We looked at a company that looked at only one page on this company's website, only one page, right? And it was very early in the morning. It was from a major company in the Northwest Illinois, and he looked at a spec sheet for the product that my client sold, right? That's what he looked at, one spec sheet, early Sunday morning on my client's website. And when we had the sales meeting with that customer, I said, what do you think he was doing? You think he was bored with Sunday evening television and decided to visit your website? We laughed. He said, don't be facetious. I said, obviously, he has your product in his doors. This guy made products for doors, glass doors. And I said, he obviously needed a part. There's no other reason to look at a spec sheet on a manufacturer's website unless you need something. Would you agree with that? So he says, well, that's great information, but how do you know that? I said, because I called the facility manager. This was in a sales meeting on Wednesday, and on Monday I had called the facility manager of this big company, and I inquired, and I learned a lot from that one phone call. I learned their advertising. They were actually looking for 3 facility managers. I learned that they do have my clients' products on their doors, not all of them, but on their doors. And I told him, I said, I found this out. I made a phone call. I did research. And he said, what would you do? Then what would you do? I said, well, if I were you, I would do a door audit. He said, what's that? I said, I don't know. I just made it up. He started laughing. I said, no, I'm serious. I would call up the facility manager. Here's her name. She's the boss. And just tell her you want to go out there and do a door audit. You want to audit the doors on the parts, your parts on these glass doors. Jim, he stopped me right there. And he said, Jim, not every door is going to have my parts on it. I said, so what? Do the door audit, present her with the audit, and she's going to ask you a question when you give her with the door audit. Because on the door audit, you're going to look at your parts on glass doors, and you're going to give her a mean time between failure report with this door audit. And you know what MTF is, right? Mean time between failure. It's basically when you predict the part will go. And all parts don't last forever, I'm sorry to say, but they will fail. And most manufacturers know when they will fail, have an idea when they will fail. So you give her that report with your other report and say, you know, you've got 1,000 doors, 500 have my component on them and the others don't. And she's going to say, well, can you tell me about these other doors that don't? I said, no, I don't. You'll have to call the competitor. And she's going to say, well, how much will that cost? I said, I don't know, because I'm not charging you for my door audit. What do you mean you're not charging me? I said, I wanted to do this for you because I saw, you know, you have our parts on your door, and I want to make sure that you're aware of when they will fail. And if you need parts, I can probably get you to the distributor to sell them to you. And she's going to say something to you, Mike. His name was Mike. And what is she going to say? This is all predictable, mostly. She's going to ask you to go and replace those other 500 doors with your parts so she knows when they're going to fail. Or she's going to call your competitor and he's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. Either way, you win. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what research does. That's what research does. It lets you ask questions, intelligent questions that drives you to more answers. What is the highest value? These are the questions we just went over when you're doing RFM analysis. Get an idea bank. Hatch a strategy. What tactics will work? Test, test, test. Maybe it's not a phone call. Maybe it's an email. Maybe it's a FedEx package to a high-valued prospect. Test, test, test. And don't underestimate social media. Ladies and gentlemen, social media, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I don't care, is a listening tool. It's not a talking tool. What do you mean? Everybody's talking on it? Of course they are. But it's a listening tool. An engineer, a friend of mine, said when social media started really taking and getting legs, he said, this is crazy. It's going to destroy the world, which I don't disagree with. But I said, why do you say that, John? You're an engineer. He said, because there's so much BS on it. And I said, let me ask you a question, John. Do you think there was BS before social media? And he said, yes, but now you can see it. And isn't that the truth? Now you can see it. But let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with listening and seeing? The chart I told you about the 22 billion impressions is on the bottom right over there, where he's talking about the relationship between Chanel, a major, luxury brand, right? Chanel, fashion brand, and the people that use Chanel. And you see how that star curve, they all match. And he showed other charts where the brand message was not getting through, that there was a different message that the people had about it. I'm not saying you need to go out and gather 22 billion impressions about your brand. What I am telling you that you need to gather data. You need to do research. You have to listen. And, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Don't engage. I'm not saying engage people. I'm saying listen. Listen to what people say. Listen to how people say it. And then ask yourself, how does that relate to what you're doing? And the rules of engagement are simple. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. One of my most successful blogs is 7 things to ask when you lose a pitch. And I wrote this after losing a pitch, after being set up, actually, to lose the pitch. And I didn't know it. I felt it, but I didn't believe it, but I was. It's one of my most, over 10,000 people since I posted this have read this blog. How do you know that, Jim? Because I monitor it, I research it. I have a code that tells me who hits it, how long they stay. I don't know who they are, but I know they're reading it. And when I can't identify them through their IP address, lawyers love this blog. So when I found that out, I asked myself, well, why do lawyers like 7 things to ask when you lose a pitch? I'm going to guess because they lose a lot of pitches. We all lose a lot of pitches. The one on the bottom, show me to the sales prevention office, was a tale told to me by my Don Tickle, my mentor, my sales guy, his brother, Richard Tickle. And that's another story, but you can read it. You should research all the time. Research all the time. How do you get people off hold? How do you get them to pull the trigger? Ladies and gentlemen, you give them something to shoot at. You give them an idea. You tell them something they don't know. Tell them something they don't know. Telling something they do know, and they say, well, I knew that. Say, well, I'm glad you did, because here's the truth. It's true. Elmer Letterman started group insurance in the United States. That's the quote on the left. He basically said, logic is great, but it ain't going to convince people to buy from you. Passion does that. Emotion does that. The stock market, ladies and gentlemen, like we were talking about banking, is not a rational thing. It's not rational, it's emotional. People are emotional. And research is the closest thing you can come to understanding, right, emotions, except people will still fool you. That's why Coke, the new Diet Coke, failed. Prisoners are notorious for telling, psychologists what they want to. Yeah, my mother beat me to get out of prison. They're notorious. People lie. Well, you have to be able to discern the lie, discern the information, to get the truth, because what you decide to do with your business, the decisions you make, unless they're grounded in at least some research, you're going to have an awful amount of luck to do it. So business basics. What are people buying now? Why do they buy now? Are they online? Do you have an online store? Do you need an online store? What should you do? Today, we're making a major presentation this afternoon to a major client. And one of the things we're going to tell them that he needs, ladies and gentlemen, is a help desk. Now, how do we know? What is that? Well, a help desk, because people need help. I don't care how professional you are. You run into a situation, you're going to need help. And a help desk is very important. We answer the phone in 2 rings at Interline. Try it. When we're done, call up that phone number. Try it. Do your own interviews. Do social media. Do a little bit. Don't spend hours. You can get lost in it. I'm a big Twitter guy. I rarely do Twitter now, a few times a week. There are tools to help you do all of these platforms at the same time. Be wary of new platforms, which are coming out all the time. Because then you can't bend your will to the platform. You have to bend to the platform's will. You want to bend the situation to your will as much as you can. Why? Because there's too many variables in the world today, right? You can't change things that much. You can only change your reaction to it. Well, you better be able to know what you're reacting to if you're going to adjust your own reactions, right? Focus, prioritize. Put a question on your website. Do a short survey. We all specify manufacturers. When's the last time you called up a manufacturer and said, I'd like some of your samples to test in my office. Can you send me some samples? Can you send me a couple of samples of your tile? Do you have a color chart? Whatever. Tap them. Tap them for information. Make phone calls to your prospect. Walk the track. Simon Sinek has a great gig going on selling the why, and it's very true, but it's not true. Selling the why and why it ain't so is not true anymore, but don't tell Simon that. Because it's a great thing. If you could sell the why, do it. But that's not why people buy anymore. Because that why has been diffused. They want the benefit. What is the benefit for what you're selling? Remember I said you're not a math formula. Heisenberg principle. We have to come close. The faster an electron moves, the more you don't know where it is. The more you know where it is, the faster it moves. It's crazy. One of my clients described the climate today, Jim, it's like quicksand. It is. So how do you get yourself out of the quicksand? You do research. Some final suggestions, mini focus groups. Remember, become invisible. Don't, I'm a famous architect. Of course you are, but pretend you're not. Pretend you're not, and go undercover. See how people really think. I went to a showroom the other day doing some intelligence gathering. I stood there for 15 minutes before anyone approached me. 15 minutes. And I looked around like, I was interested in things. 15 minutes, no one approached me. The only reason I stayed there is because I was doing research. That's no way to greet somebody. Some showrooms you walk in, are you here browsing or do you have an appointment? The bigger ones do that, right? I say, we're just browsing, and you walk in and you browse. Or make an appointment and keep the appointment. But be a lifelong learner. It's time for questions. I don't see any questions in here. I cannot believe I am that successful, but I guess I am. So, since there are no questions, thank you very much. If you have any questions about this webinar, please contact me, Jim at Interline Group, Jim at interlinegroup.com. You can call me at 358-4848, 358-4848. You can go to interlinegroup.com/evaluate, and we'll send you our designer guides, survival guides. Or you can follow me on Twitter. Either way, we'd love to hear from you. I really would. Very excited. We have these webinars online. And our next webinar, which will be next month, April 13th, I believe. If you go to Interland Group /hire, right, you'll see that, check out my website, that this webinar, ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to sign up for this, because it's really why people and how people decide whether or not to hire you. And guess what the answer is? Your website. I'm not just making that up. It's your website, the most important marketing tactic you have. So I hope you can join it, intrln.com/hire. Go there, it'll explain what it is and how you can do it. And again, thank you so much for your time. And your hour was very well devoted. I hope to hear from you. Thank you very much.